What is Three-Eye Atlas and why do we care? You've probably heard about this interstellar whatever traveling through our solar system. Is it a comet? Is it extraterrestrial technology? I'm Chris Daly, and I'm here with Ryan Geckner.
Where did someone see Bigfoot crossing I-80 north of State College, Pennsylvania? And did we learn anything new from the National Archives drop of 5,000 new documents about Amelia Earhart? This is Headlines from the Beyond.
All right, so we thought we would come in and do something new as opposed to our regular episodes. So, Ryan, do you want to tell everybody what we're doing?
Yeah, so Chris and I have been talking about trying to put out more content that's about things that are happening right now. So a lot of our episodes, or all of our episodes now, are not really reacting to anything that's happening in real time.
Well, I mean, death is happening in real time.
Well, that's true. Death is happening in real time. That is true. Please go listen to episode 5. But we don't really have anything like there's lots of stuff that's happening in the world of the paranormal all the time, every day. And we wanted to kind of throw in our 2 cents about it and give you some quick little episodes to keep you abreast of whatever is going on in the paranormal world. And so the biggest news story, I think, floating around about anything remotely paranormal right now is Three-Eye Atlas. And Chris, you have been obsessed.
I have been obsessed with Three-Eye Atlas because it's fascinating and because honestly, watching the things that are happening between NASA and Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard has been really interesting. And from the perspective of a scientist, just watching that dialogue has been super interesting, and that's what drew me in. And then starting to look at what is Three-Eye Atlas, and it is an interesting piece of something in space. And
That something is
we
the
don't know what it
million
is.
dollar question.
So we thought, let's do a deep dive on this, and we're going to do a series, kind of examining Three-Eye Atlas, but not just Three-Eye Atlas, also trying to understand what Avi Loeb is saying and what some other astrobiologists, astrophysicists are saying about the possibility of extraterrestrial technology and extraterrestrial intelligent life. So we'll be doing a series of, I think we planned 6 mini
Mhm,
episodes
mhm.
on this, but we're also going to throw in some other headlines in each of them.
Yeah.
So let's start off with what does Three-Eye Atlas even mean? Why do we call it that?
Yeah, this is okay. So while I said Chris has been obsessed with this is the only piece of this that I actually have been even remotely interested in, just because I think it's fun. So you may have wondered where we even come up with this name, Three-Eye Atlas. And so the first part of this is that the three comes from the fact that it's the third object that has originated outside of our solar system that we have identified. The eye just means interstellar, meaning it came from outside of our solar system. And the first two that were identified were Oumuamua in 2017. So that was one eye, Oumuamua. And if you do any sort of a deep dive into that, there's lots of theories about what it was. Could have been a comet. According to Avi Loeb, maybe it was some space junk that was floating around. And then in 2019, we had two-eye Borisov, which appeared as what we would consider a conventional comet. So it met all of the criteria for normal comets that Three-Eye Atlas really doesn't, that we're about to kind of talk about. And then where's the Atlas come from? So this is what I think is funny about this whole naming convention is that so Oumuamua, Borisov, Atlas, those are all observatories or telescopes. And basically, if you see one of these things, you get to dibs it and name it. Like this is mine, and nose goes like it's mine. And so Atlas stands for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, which sounds absolutely terrifying. This system discovered it back in July, so we've actually known about this for quite a while.
And it was in the news back then,
And it
but no
was in
one
the
paid
news, but
attention. So
nobody really paid attention because it was really far away at that point. Atlas is just an astronomical survey and early warning system, obviously, based on that name, developed by the University of Hawaii. It's funded by NASA. If you didn't know, in case you didn't know, Hawaii is actually home to many, many, many big telescopes. And there are telescopes in multiple different locations, including in Chile, as well as Hawaii. And the Chilean location is actually the one that saw Three-Eye Atlas first. So, what do we know about 3I Atlas, Chris? Why is this so weird, and why might it be alien technology?
Well, as you mentioned, it does come from outside our solar system. So anything that's coming from outside the solar system, you expect is going to be a little different. You know, it's not going to look like things that are in our solar system. And just to kind of throw out there what places like NASA are saying is everything that's unusual about this thing is just because it's from another solar system. And that might be true. I'm not saying it's not true, but I find it to be myopic to think about it that way, and to not explore other possibilities. So, first thing to say is that 3I Atlas does not pose a threat to Earth as long as it remains on the current trajectory.
Yet.
Yeah. I mean, it is going to come close to Earth, about 170 million miles. So that's, in my mind, not super close.
It's a distance.
That's a distance. But it will come within 170 million miles of Earth on December 19th. So we're going to be watching this thing really carefully until at least December 19th, and then it'll pass by, and we'll probably keep watching it as long as we can.
For comparison's sake, the moon is just shy of 239,000 miles from us. So we're not even talking even remotely in the neighborhood of the moon.
Right. So this thing's not going to hit us.
No.
And back in July, there were people who were saying, "Oh my God, is this thing going to hit us?" No. So don't worry about that. We're not talking about, the giant comet that hits the Earth and that's it. I hope.
Things would have to get really weird, even weirder than they have already been.
So what are these unusual things that everybody's talking about? First of all, there's this unusual trajectory. This comet, and I'm going to keep calling it a comet because that's the going thought
explanation.
on the most likely explanation. It's going to pass pretty close to Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. So it's going to pass pretty close to several planets in our solar system, all of which are moving. So it's interesting that the trajectory passes by all of those. It's also, or was, because this is now past, it was eclipsed by the sun at perihelion. So perihelion is when it's closest to the sun. And so it was eclipsed by the sun from our view at that time. It also has just kind of a weird trajectory in terms of where it is along the elliptical plane of the planets around the sun. It's very close to that plane. So it's sort of within, I think it's 5 degrees of that plane, which means it's following a really interesting trajectory that allows it to come very close to all of these planets. It allows potentially observations of all of these different planets and the sun,
And statistically, for it to line up in that way is
It's very unusual.
Very minimal chance.
And if you want to know all the statistics, I'm not going to read off the p-values, but Avi Loeb has been providing all of those on his Medium posts. So if you want to know all of that stuff, please read him, not us. Neither one.
He is the expert on this.
He's the expert. We're not physicists. We just find this interesting. So the tail of this comet has been inconsistent. Sometimes it seems to be missing. Sometimes it has what's called an anti-tail. So what are these things? Well, the tail of the comet, that's the dust and gas and all of that that's coming off of the comet. It points directly away from the sun because the sun exerts this extreme pressure from radiation. There's also solar wind. And so the tail of the comet points away from the sun. So an anti-tail, they don't respond, the anti-tail doesn't respond the same way to the sun. It's made up of larger dust particles than the main tail. So it doesn't get blown away. And that makes sense. If you have larger particles, they're not getting blown away. So that's an anti-tail. You also may hear the term orbital trail. That's the stream of large dust particles that are left along the comet's orbit. So when you see a comet, you see this long train of dust particles. That's actually the orbital trail. Typically, when you see a comet, you see a tail. In this case, at points, we saw an anti-tail, and at points that didn't look like there was a tail. It might be that our vantage point kind of changed that, whether we could see the tail or not. But that's not normal. Usually we just see the tail. 3I Atlas also has a massive nucleus, which is much bigger than previous interstellar comets. So huge nucleus, but it's moving faster than both of those other 2 interstellar comets we mentioned. So that's interesting. If it's bigger, you don't expect it to be moving faster. And again, there are statistical probabilities for all of these things. And all we're going to say is they're low.
Right.
You shouldn't see this.
Right.
Okay, if you look at the gas plume that surrounds this thing, there's more nickel than iron in it, which is what you see in industrial nickel alloys that we produce.
Mhm.
The nickel to cyanide ratio is orders of magnitude larger than all known comets. And it contains only 4% water by mass. In other comets, water is the primary constituent. So this means that the gas plume, the stuff around it, is unique. It's different. What does that mean to us? We don't know. It just means it's different.
Right.
And that's the same thing. It's got this with what they call negative polarization, which I'm not going to try to explain negative polarization.
Yeah, listen, people, we did a deep dive on trying to understand that, and I don't really know. Still, I'm more confused now than I was before.
Well, it has to do with light waves and how they sort of reflect off of different particles.
Dust. The
No,
dust is weird. That's what I was left with. The dust
Dust
is weird.
It's unusual. And that's kind of the same thing we were just saying with the gas plume being made up of different things. So it's just different.
Yep.
It's weird. It also came from a direction that it coincides with the wow signal to about 9 degrees. So the wow signal, which I know sounds really odd, this was a really powerful 72-second radio burst. It was detected in 1977 out of the constellation Sagittarius. We've never heard it again.
Spooky, man.
But it's a radio burst, so like there's noise out there.
That's still spooky.
And it came from this similar direction. So that's interesting.
Maybe that was it, like shooting off. It was firing.
You know, maybe it was.
77. There we go. That's my theory, friends. You heard it here first.
Maybe it was. Now, when it was at or near perihelion, it brightened. It brightened really fast. And it brightened faster than any known comet that we've seen. And it was also bluer than the sun. It's a little bit different in color. Again, weird.
It's doing lots of weird things.
It's doing lots of weird things.
Lots of weird things in combination.
It's got a bunch of jets coming off of it. These are other things that we kind of look at. And these jets are in all different directions. So if you look at it and you look at the tail, you see the antitail, you see all of these jets, which again, it's more of these particles going off in different directions, is essentially what all of these things are looking at. But they're going in a lot of different directions, which is again, unusual. You also have non-gravitational acceleration near perihelion. So what the heck is non-gravitational?
Yes, because everyone was hand wringing over that for like several days.
Well, typically things move based on gravitational forces. And the sun exerts a tremendous gravitational force. As you would imagine, it's huge.
It's big, yes.
And that's why we have the orbits of the planets. I mean, this is how the universe works. We have gravitational forces. So this thing sped up without the sun making it speed up. Now, there is a possibility that it was speeding up because the sun was melting off ice particles. And so its mass would have changed. But what we saw post-perihelion was not a huge change in mass, but it still sped up. So that's really interesting. So what made it speed up? We should have seen 13% of its mass go away based on how much it sped up. So we should have seen a big change. And we didn't see that.
That's spooky.
So all of this is really weird. And as I said, if you want to see, there's statistical probabilities that for all of this, and they're all exceptionally low. So when you put them all together, the statistical probability of this thing is astronomically low. Notice its probability, though.
Right. It's not
So,
possibility.
but that means it could be a natural comet.
Right.
So what does it mean? Do you want to?
Well,
about
I mean, yeah. So I think, and we'll get into this in subsequent episodes where we, dive deeper into Avi Loeb and the sort of mainstream.
Who has become like one of my heroes,
He
scientific.
really has.
Yeah.
One of these sort of, or I guess the mainstream sort of scientific opinion, the NASA party line on this is there's been a lot of debate about like what it could be, and certain people in the scientific community have been somewhat kind of closed-minded, I guess. And we're going to talk a little bit about kind of why we think that's short-sighted. But, I think all of this means, first, we should just actually pay attention to the thing. We should really pay attention carefully to it, because it's doing a lot of really weird stuff. So even if it's not space junk or an alien
The
spacecraft,
mothership,
the
yeah.
mothership, beam me up. Even if it's not one of those things, we have a lot to learn from it very clearly, right? And so it doesn't mean that it's definitely alien technology. It doesn't even mean that it's alien in general. Like it could just be, whatever. It brings up the question of why this is so particularly different than anything else we've seen. We know a fair bit about comets based on everything you just described, and our two other observations of interstellar objects, which we know a little bit about. There's lots of things that are happening around this conversation with Three Eye Atlas that should make you wonder. And I think most of our listeners probably are wondering about these things if you know anything about it, but there were lots of things about the process at which we learned about Three Eye Atlas that were kind of weird. The government and NASA weren't super forthcoming with the imagery.
And I know they kept saying it was because of the government shutdown.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
And if I know anything about nerds, like we're still crunching data and working even when we're not being paid.
Last I checked, most of the government was working during the shutdown. They just weren't being paid, which
Right. True.
that's a whole other
True.
conversation.
True.
But
yeah, and in addition to that, there was some kind of beef between, well, not really apparent, like clear beef, but NASA didn't clearly respond to Avi Loeb when he asked questions about it.
And he's asking for, can I see the pictures?
Yeah, he wasn't asking for, outlandish stuff, and he's kind of a big deal, which we'll talk about. And then, there's just been this weird outcry against Avi Loeb, just generally in the scientific community. And it bothers me just from the sense that like we are in this really interesting point in history where anti-intellectualism is rampant, and for us to be dunking on each other seems very short-sighted to
So,
me.
I mean, historically, that's
what we do. Oh, 100% that's what we do. I'm not going to deny that. That's part of what we do. But, I think Avi Loeb is a very public intellectual.
Yes.
And I wonder if some of this isn't from that too, because there is kind of this feeling among many academics that if you go that sort of public intellectual route, it's less than, you're not as, scientifically rigorous, you're just chasing the dollar rather than.
And I think it's the exact opposite.
Right. Yes.
One of the things that I always tell people is your material when you can teach it to someone who
Yes.
doesn't have the background that you have.
Yes.
And that is what Avi Loeb has done for a long time now.
Yeah.
Is take astrophysics and make it so that the rest of us might be able to understand some of it. And interestingly, when he contacted NASA and didn't get a response, there was somebody else
someone who you've probably heard of
who contacted NASA and got an immediate response, and that was Kim Kardashian. So, sorry, NASA, you should be responding to the scientist.
Make it make sense.
Right.
Make it make sense.
And so Avi Loeb's response, which I thought was classic, was, well, she can come join my team.
I've got an opening for a research assistant position.
So I thought that was great. But yeah, there's been this outcry of the scientific community against Loeb, and that really bothers me. Because if you look historically, we do that to each other all the time, and it actually stops science. It does not further any type of science to do that sort of thing. Yes, be critical of each other in the sense to make us look more deeply into things and figure things out. But what we're seeing here is the opposite of, trying to figure things out. We're seeing, don't consider that hypothesis.
Right.
Which historically, not a great move. And we always talk about Galileo as an example of that. Well, don't consider the possibility that, the sun might be the center of the system. It's Earth. And so we couldn't consider it until, well, guess what?
We found out that was.
Okay. And I'm just saying that, we need to consider all of these hypotheses. And so by saying we can't even look at this as potentially technological, I think is, as I said before, myopic. It's we need to look at all possibilities.
So last week NASA had a briefing.
Yeah.
So on the 19th,
live.
Chris watched it live. Like I said, this has become Chris's Roman Empire, as the kids say. And This was kind of the first sort of really public facing statement made by NASA. So what did we learn, Chris, in this 3 hour live stream?
Nothing. So we got some new images, and they talked a lot about the things that we've already talked about,
Hmm.
the fact that it's unique, the fact that it's interstellar, and they said very clearly over and over that this is just a weirdly behaving comet. We have no reason to believe anything else. And so when they got to the question and answer part, there was a reporter from, I believe it was CBS,
Hmm.
who asked the question. It was the second question. And it was essentially like, is this, could this be alien technology? The way it was phrased, though, the way the reporter asked it, it was like, I know you probably didn't even consider
Sure, you
this,
didn't consider this.
and so even by phrasing the question that way, that's wrong.
Hmm.
The question should have been, there are people out there who believe this. What is your response
What
to
do you
that?
think?
There you
Yeah.
go. Instead of kind of making it sound like anybody who thinks this might be aliens crazy.
Hmm.
Their answer was to essentially not answer the question,
Right.
which, seems very government-like.
Yeah, it
But,
was. It was
yeah.
very, yeah.
But what I what I found really interesting was that an hour before this press conference, Avi Loeb was asked, "What do you think we're going to learn?"
I don't expect big news. NASA will repeat the official mantra that 3I Atlas is a natural comet and that they were unable to process the data until now because of the government shutdown. And probably the high-rise image will show a fuzzy ball of light like the Hubble image. But I hoped to be surprised, and I was not.
So basically, everything he said NASA was going to do an hour before the press conference is exactly what NASA did. And so the end result of that press conference is we still don't really know that much.
Nope, we do not.
Which is not that shocking to me. I mean, that briefings like that tend to be that way.
Yeah.
In fact, I think if the announcement was we've identified extraterrestrial life, I don't think it would have been for NASA scientists talking.
No, we would have got one of those like alerts on our phones and
I think the press conference would have come out of the White House,
probably
not NASA, so not shocking, but yeah. And the images were really fuzzy. And okay, it's really far away, fine. But hopefully as it comes closer, we'll get some better images. So that's 3i Atlas, the beginning.
Mhm.
Next time I think we'll dive into who Avi Loeb is and what the Loeb scale is, which is kind of a measure for whether or not an object might be technology. So, what's the other news that's come out? Because
Yeah.
I've been totally obsessed with this.
Yeah, so there have been a couple of things that I think are worth us pointing out to our listeners. So at the beginning of the month, there was a report that came out, or actually it was the beginning of the last month, but the reporting on it started trickling in or getting a little bit more exciting, I guess. At the beginning of November, there was a Bigfoot sighting in Center County, Pennsylvania, which is just north, where it was just north of State College, Pennsylvania, which is where Penn State is, if you're unfamiliar. And it was a daytime sighting, and the witness got a very clear view of what he thinks or what may have been Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it. And so they were traveling, him and his wife were traveling westbound on I-80.
And I-80, if you're not familiar, I-80 is a
It's
massive
a
road
massive highway
that goes across the country. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a major highway.
And so he saw about 150 yards ahead of him what appeared to be a large bipedal uh, creature walking across the road, and it crossed in front of another car that was in front of him, so close that he really thought that it was going to get hit, but it didn't. He saw it cross over the road and then go over the guardrail.
So it had to be going pretty quick if it's crossing in front of a car on
Yeah.
80, right?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. And so, the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, researchers have been out kind of looking at the site and they've interviewed him, looked over his report, and they, are pretty convinced that this is a really solid sighting. I think the thing that sticks out to me in this report, and we'll link it in the show notes, is a quote from the witness. He says, "I just want to add that I know what I saw, but don't know what I saw." I'm an avid hunter with 50 plus years in the woods. This was not a bear. And so make of that what you will. Maybe Bigfoot was trying to make it to the next Penn State game. Who knows?
Was he crossing in the right direction for that?
That I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. And then the other thing that has been kind of buzzing a little bit, but not that much, if you remember back earlier this year, President Trump announced that he was directing the Department of National Intelligence Director Amelia Earhart,
Yeah.
Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, to release all of the documents that the government has, or to release another batch of documents about the Amelia Earhart disappearance.
It was a lot of documents.
It was a lot.
5,000 new
Yeah, almost
documents. So
5,000.
kind of got excited about that.
Yeah, it was kind of like, all right, cool. We're looking for those Epstein files, but Earhart comes before Epstein, so maybe we'll get to those eventually. So those dropped a couple weeks ago, and they've been kind of not that exciting. Mostly the documents were about searches that happened in the immediate aftermath of her disappearance. And so there's lots of Navy and Coast Guard documents, and there's some maps and things like that we didn't have before. And I think the most interesting thing that people have found in here is that her last radio transmission is in there stating her location and where she was when she
And
gave
that's cool.
that.
To have
Yeah,
the last
yeah.
transmission is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know why some of this was not previously released.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think there's probably a lot of stuff sitting in the archives that's classified and confidential that people just forgot is there. It's
That's
just,
quite
like, people want to know the Earhart stuff, so they're like, "Oh, can you release that stuff?" Same goes with like the JFK stuff too, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably tons in there that we'll never see.
Right.
But it's cool to see some things being opened up. It just didn't. This did not happen to give us
Right.
any tremendously new information about what happened to her.
Thanks for listening, and we hope that you stay tuned for more upcoming episodes about 3i Atlas and all the other exciting headlines surrounding the paranormal. This has been Headlines from the Beyond.